Hello, Harley. And the rest of you watching me on the smartboard. Okay, we're gonna start by watching a couple videos. We're gonna be talking about the Cenozoic era. So we're gonna watch a video on that, a couple of them, and then we'll talk about it. WandaVision. Has anybody watched WandaVision? Is that what you're talking about? I watched it.
It's really good, and like how you try to watch it, it's really boring. So I don't know. I guess it just kind of depends.
I don't know much about the Marvel world, but I find it interesting. Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. Oh, well, there's a thing to skip the ad now. Okay.
Welcome to Math and Science. In this video,
Okay.
I'd like to talk.
Okay.
Welcome to Math and Science. In this video, I'd like to talk about the Cenozoic era of the geologic timescale. The Cenozoic era is the most recent era and is part of the Cenozoic Eon, along with the Paleozoic and Mesozoic eras. The Cenozoic era lasted roughly 65 million years. It is often described as the age of mammals, but could also be called the age of flowering plants or the age of insects. Let's hit several highlights of this era. Although the first mammals appear in the Mesozoic era, they began to thrive during the Cenozoic era and spread throughout the world. Birds become much more diverse and also spread throughout the world. Flowering plants also thrive and also spread throughout the world. With these flowering plants, insects can also thrive and they prosper. Apes and humans also appear. During this era, the earth is cooler and ice ages occur, along with the formation of glaciers. The continents have moved into their modern location, and several mountain ranges, including the Alps, Himalayas, and the Rocky Mountains, are formed. So there we go, an exciting time, Cenozoic era. Thanks for watching, and Moo Math uploads a new math and science video every day. Please subscribe and share.
Okay, so that's a pretty good, like, just very basic background of the Cenozoic era.
That's right. TurboTax-free edition.
Wow, okay. Moving on to watch in a little bit. Before I get into, that's weird. Before I get into, I did not even share the screen, so Harley heard that, but she didn't get to watch it. I'll do that next time. I have 4 homework papers. I need 2 more homework papers. Pamela and Annette. I got pictures. Not you for lunch. Okay. And I gave you a worksheet while that was playing. This is just going to be a notes worksheet to help you study. It's not going to be, there's not going to be a homework worksheet attached with it. So we're just going to talk through it. Harley, I will send this home. And there's stuff you can fill out along the way also as you watch this. So the Cenozoic era is the current era that we are living in. It started about 65 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous period of the Mesozoic era. And it's because of that mass extinction that we had, the end of the dinosaurs, led to the Cenozoic era beginning. The Cenozoic era has been broken down into 2 periods. the Tertiary period, and the Quaternary period. The Tertiary period has been like up until 10,000 years ago or so. And then we have the Quaternary period, which is like the current period. It hasn't been very long at all. So 65 million years isn't very long in terms of the other eras. And there have been some pretty big events that have happened during that time, though. So let's see. Everything that we're going to talk about now is a lot more familiar animal-wise, plant-wise, even how the world looks. It's going to look more familiar to you than what it looked like in the past. So the continents were splitting up during the Mesozoic era. Pangea split apart, things were moving. The continents now are looking a lot closer to what they look like today. Of course, they move a little bit every year, so there's been some movement, but most of it has happened. Like, for the most part, it would look, if you look at a map at the beginning of the Cenozoic era and present, they would look very, very similar. During this time, because they're moving, a lot of mountains have been built during this time. Very early in the Cenozoic era, or in the Tertiary period, India actually crashed into Asia. And I remember showing a video back when we were talking about plate tectonics of India kind of moving and crashing into Asia. So technically all that land there is two separate land masses, but the India plate is trying to like work its way through the Asia plate. So they crashed together. When they crashed together, what did they form? Himalaya Mountains, yep, with Mount Everest. And because India is still trying to like crash through or like work its way through Asia, those mountains are still getting higher. They are the highest on Earth, and they will continue to grow until something causes the place to stop moving or to start coming apart or moving in a different direction. About the same time, Africa began to push into Europe. So Africa and Europe were separate, but now they're connected up by Egypt and Jordan and Israel. Those areas are connected kind of with a giant land bridge type thing. But Africa is trying to get closer to Europe. So that helped create the Alps, which are mountains that go through Europe. They don't go, there's no mountains in Africa that were formed because of that motion. In North America, the Rocky Mountains kept growing, and we also have new mountain ranges that have formed on the West Coast. So there's the Cascades, the Sierra Nevadas. There's a couple more also up in like Washington and Oregon, and I can't think of what they're called at the moment. But they all have like, they're all little itty bitty mountain ranges. They're not as big as the Rockies or the Appalachians. And they were formed at the beginning of this time period also. And because everything was happening on the West Coast, that wasn't doing much on the East Coast, so the Appalachian Mountains were staying put. They're not growing, and they're technically eroding away. So they are smaller, getting smaller each and every day because of erosion. So if you would see them now compared to at the beginning of the period or of the era, they're a lot smaller and more rounded than what they were 65 million years ago. During this time, after that asteroid or the meteorite hit or the volcano erupted, whatever caused the big mass extinction, the climate began to cool, and it kept getting cooler. It's just the cycle of how things work. And eventually the Earth got so cold that ice covered the poles completely, and the mountaintops, and it spread. During the Pleistocene epoch, which is the very first one in the Cenozoic era, we actually were covered in ice. About 30% of the Earth's surface was covered in ice. And at that point, we called this an ice age. This isn't the first ice age that happened. There were others during the other time periods, but this one is important because there was more plants and animals on Earth. So we could see how the climate affected the animals that lived here. So we had an ice age throughout the Pleistocene epoch. Oh, sorry, the Pleistocene epoch was the first epoch of the Quaternary period. So it's been very, very recent ice age. And it wasn't the first, but it's, you know, the most recent. So it's the most important to us. These big glaciers and ice that covered the Earth did dip down to Nebraska area, and that's the glaciers that cross through Nebraska, depositing some really good soil, creating some of the flatter areas that we use for farmland, and even depositing a lot of the sand that we have in the sandhills. So they were very important in like Nebraska's purpose, I guess. If we didn't have the glaciers, it may not be the big farmland that it is today. Because we had a lot of glaciers and ice, that had to come from somewhere. So it came from the oceans. And if a lot of the ocean is frozen up in ice, what happened to the water level? What do you think? It went down. So if all the water got taken out of the ocean, not all of it, but a lot of water got taken out of the ocean and froze, the ocean itself went down. So a lot more land was exposed than what there is today. So like the coastline would be longer. Florida was bigger because there was more land exposed there. Same thing with, you know, the borders of any continent, they looked different. And some of those countries would have been larger as well. Like specifically with Florida, it was twice as big as it is today, at least width. So that'd make it look a lot different. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's look at this first part of the page, because everything I just talked about pretty much is in here. So number one, it says India crashes into Asia. Did that happen in the tertiary period or the quaternary period? It happened pretty early. It happened in the tertiary. So you'll put just a check mark or an X or whatever in that first column. The climate begins to cool. Did it cool like early, like in the tertiary period, or in the quaternary period? Actually, the tertiary period. By the time it hit the quaternary period, it was an ice age. So in order to like be cold enough, it has to cool in the tertiary period. Glaciers covered 30% of Earth's land surface in the quaternary period. Yes. So we should have tertiary, quaternary. And then number 4, the Alps form. That was very early in the period. So that would be a tertiary, or early in the era would be a tertiary. Number 5, glaciers advance and retreat several times. That had to happen during the Ice Age, which was in the Quaternary period. Antarctica links Australia to South America. This would have been very early in the era, before it completely separated. So that's tertiary period. Number 7 and 8 are both about mountains forming. Did that happen early or more recent? Early in the era, so both 7 and 8 are tertiary period. Okay, I guess we didn't talk about number 9, but forests replaced grasses, and that happened during the Quaternary period as well. Partly because like trees could survive the coldness where the grasses couldn't, so lots of trees kind of thrived during the Ice Age. Number 10, the climate is warm. So technically, you could check both, but the climate was warmer overall during the tertiary period. Because it was very, very cold not too long ago. But we are getting warmer today than what we were, in years past because of global warming. Number 11, ice covers the poles during the Pliocene epoch. And the Pliocene epoch is the last of the tertiary period. So tertiary period for that one. Number 12, inland seas that had covered the land drain away. That was during the Quaternary period, because either they froze into glaciers or once it started warming up, those drained into the ocean. 13, Australia is located near India. That is Quaternary. It's just like it's more like it is today. Like if you look at a map, Australia is close to India. And number 14, Africa pushes into Europe. That is a tertiary period. 12, Quaternary. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the animals that lived during the Cenozoic era. The video we watched referred to the Cenozoic era as the age of the mammals. And although this wasn't the first time we saw mammals, this is the first time, this is when mammals really took over. In the Paleozoic era, we had like the age of the fishes, the age of the invertebrates. Then we had reptiles, or the age of the dinosaurs. And now mammals are really like the dominant species. How big were mammals at the end of the Mesozoic era? They're about as big as what animal? A cat. So they were pretty small. Over the Cenozoic era, for whatever reason, we started seeing some really, really large mammals. They were called mega mammals. And I'm not really sure why, they got to be so large. These would be animals like a woolly mammoth, which you guys know is kind of like an elephant, but furry, with bigger tusks, or they're on Ice Age. These were not even the largest of the mega mammals, though. There were things that were even larger than that. So, you know, elephants are big, some whales are really big, but we had mammals that were larger than that. So we also had giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, like saber-toothed tigers. And these guys really, really thrived in the cold weather. So a saber-toothed tiger is just like a regular tiger that we have today, but they had really, really big, like fang teeth that would come out of their mouth. So anything saber-tooth is like giant front teeth. And that just helped them rip apart other animals so that they could eat them. So a lot of these animals were carnivores and they would eat other animals. So let's see. Yeah, so these really thrived, especially the mega mammals. They thrived during the tertiary period and the ice age because they had lots and lots of fur to keep them warm. They really liked the cold weather. As the ice age went away, things warmed up, we started to see fewer and fewer of those mega mammals because they were just way too hairy to survive today. It's warm enough that they just didn't like it, so they like went extinct. We're gonna watch a video to compare the sizes of these animals.
Tom and Jerry are entering our world. This is a disaster on February 26th.
Zoom makes things so slow. Okay.
That's probably Tom and Jerry, the movie, rated PG, in theaters and streaming on HBO Max.
Okay, I'm gonna like let it load here for a second. So it's gonna be just a comparison of different animals that lived during this time period. So you can get an idea of how big these mega mammals were. Okay, that would be like one of the early ones about the size of a cat. Looks like a unicorn, kind of. Okay, this is kind of like the saber-toothedness. So just the big long fangs that really, really stick out of the mouth. I made it saber-tooth. An armadillo with a spiny tail. Maybe like a moose ancestor or something. A rhino, probably. Looks kind of like an elephant. Here's another one that's similar. Okay, I think that, like, there's a human compared to a human. It's a large ape, giant kangaroo. This makes you think dinosaur, kind of. I mean, not really, but. That's a bird. Look at how big its wings are compared to the human. Okay, woolly mammoth is huge. Go back, birds. Stop. Okay. If you noticed, a lot of the mammals have these like stripe-like things. That's even how they were in the book. I don't know why they did like the striped pattern on all of these, or if they somehow know that they were striped like that. But a lot of the mammals during this time period had that weird striped pattern to them. Okay, so if you look at human, okay, you could probably stack 3 of them up before you get, at least 3 before you get to the top of this guy's head. And let's say this guy's a 6-foot tall guy, which is being generous because, you know, that's not really average, but it's at least 18 feet high. At least. And it's not even like probably stretched up all the way. It could probably move its neck and its head up and get even taller. Yeah, or even some of those crocodile looking things. Yeah. But you can see similarities between these animals and then animals we have on Earth today. The wannabe elephants. But like it has tail, the bears don't have tails like this. But like things kind of evolved and changed. So like, you know, polar bears didn't need to be that big, so they got smaller. They didn't need their tail. Not gonna lie, like that thing is, yeah. It could honestly eat you in 2 bites, probably. Yeah. It might be a little bit stubborn. Yeah, they look kind of scary. Okay. So we know about these animals again, just because of their fossils. A lot of these are not alive today. Or I mean, some of their ancestors or their relation are their descendants, but they have evolved over time, so they may not be as large. They may not be as covered with fur. They may not need the crazy sharp teeth to rip things apart. And one reason they needed those crazy sharp teeth is because so many, and large teeth, is because so many of those animals were large or had a very like thick skin, similar to like an elephant or a rhino, that they needed giant teeth to open up the body to get the meat that they want to eat. So as animals got smaller and not as many of them had that thick skin, they didn't need the giant teeth anymore. They have found some fossilized animals that have been fossilized in like tar. So they probably haven't decomposed as much. and they've also discovered some some woolly mammoths in ice. So they at least had an idea of what they look like in real life. Because if they freeze before they can decompose, their body is not gonna decompose at all. So a lot of the mammals that we looked at or that were pictured in your book lived in North America, South America, Europe, and Asia, and into Africa. Australia kind of has its own set of mammals, partially because they weren't connected to anything else. So when there's animals that are close to each other or living in the same area, they're going to evolve one way, just through interaction with other mammals or animals and their environment, things like that. In Australia, they were isolated, so the animals evolved in a different way. So that's why we have some very unique animals in Australia, mainly marsupials. So a marsupial is a type of mammal that has a pouch. So things like kangaroos, wallabies, koalas, they all have a pouch that the baby lives in. And actually when the moms deliver their babies, they're like this big, little itty bitty, just a couple of inches. And then the baby crawls up the mom, finds the pouch, hides out in the pouch, and lives there to develop more. And then it's able to, once it's fully developed, it can leave. Although it tends to hang out there still a lot, just because it's easier to like move the kid around when it's in the pouch rather than carrying it. But it's kind of like the baby's born twice. It is born and then it hangs out in the pouch for a while, and then it's born again and can like come and go as it pleases. Look.
Is it accurate that it can go in and out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So once, see, I think like this little, a baby this little is not going to be able to survive. Like this pin cap. Okay, a baby this big is not going to be able to survive on its own. Same with like these mammals, like something this little, not quite able to survive on its own. And for whatever reason, like the mom's body does not change the way like other mammals' bodies changes and allows them to like hold a baby till it's bigger. So in order for it to finish developing, it has to go in the pouch instead. And the pouches are super stretchy. So, you know, it can hold a big kangaroo, like just like in Winnie the Pooh. Roo is definitely developed fully and can come and go as she pleases. Or he, I don't remember if Roo's a boy or a girl. But anyway, Roo just hangs out in Kanga's pouch if they want to. So that's kind of a real thing.
Kangaroos are like super buff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't realize that until somebody showed me a picture. They're like this constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. So during this time also, we had humans showed up on Earth. And there are skeletons of humans that are some early ancestors of like the current humans that are like, they call them different things. So we're technically, they don't call them the same species. So like cavemen and cavewomen, they're technically a different species than the current humans on Earth today. So the big thing with like the cavemen is that they were more like a monkey in terms of like how they walked. They were more like hunched over, maybe use their hands to help them move around, while present day humans are very much upright creatures. We don't utilize our hands to help us move around. We use them for other things. And so like scientists study the different skeletons and kind of like put them in different groups. But the oldest fossil skeletons they found are about 6 million years old. Let's see, Lucy is the name of the skeleton that they found that was about 3.2 million years old. And I think that's like the oldest complete skeleton that they found, which is very, very old. And like the head size is different. The body is different too. It's a lot smaller than current humans.
So it was like a Flintstones kind of thing?
Kind of like, so the Flintstones, yeah, they lived in a cave, but they looked similar to how we would look. Let's see. Let's escape from this. So, used and then because they were living 6 million years ago, they were potentially living during like some of the really cold times, and so they needed extra hair on their bodies. Plus, they didn't have razors anyway, so but probably very realistic. I mean, they didn't have shirts like that either, but again, this would technically be after Adam and Eve, which means they know they're naked, so they have to have clothes on in some kind. Sometimes they're referred to as like Neanderthals, early people referred to as Neanderthals. I have a little bit more to wrap up with this, and we'll do the back side of the handout tomorrow. So keep people on this, and we will tomorrow. I will take your temperature in a second. I'm gonna like stop sharing, stop.